So I was having this conversation with my 14-year-old, and we were talking about, when you're having a hard time, kind of embracing the way things are, um, how difficult it can be when you are not in a position of control or influence, and you just kind of have to go along with the flow. And that kind of opened the door to me talking about being able to trust the process. Whenever you find yourself in those positions, you have to stay prayerful. You have to stay prayerful and intentional about staying in the will of God. And a lot of times, trusting the process that God has for us oftentimes won't look like what we think it should look like. And of course, the Bible teaches us that his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. And so in our human reasoning, I'll just use this as an example. If we're praying and asking God to bless us with financial stability, in our human reasoning, we would probably think that that's simply about eliminating debt and increasing the inflow of cash, right? But when we start asking God to help us become financially stable, sometimes that might mean that He starts removing things, eliminating responsibilities that we would prefer to have. You might end up losing your car or a home, or have to consolidate. That might be God's way of blessing us with financial stability, because the reality is sometimes we bite off more than we can chew, or we should be. But one of the things that I thought about in this conversation that we were having about trusting the process of God, I was telling my daughter that when you are praying in faith to receive anything from God, one of the major mistakes that children of God make sometimes is that uh, we only look for tangible evidence before we start believing that God is actually moving on our behalf. And I want to use this as an example. If you are a single person, right, and you're praying and asking God to bless you with a husband or a wife, and if I limit uh, my belief that God is going to answer this question or this request and bless me with a husband, or for a man, bless him with a wife, uh, I'm looking for tangible evidence, right? If I limit it to what I can see and I can experience in the flesh, I might miss the fact that God is moving on my behalf. So what I would say is like, well, I've been praying and praying and asking God for a husband, and I've been praying for years, right? And I mean, I don't no nobody's asked me for my telephone number. I haven't gone out on a date. Nobody's trying to holler. Nobody's even flirting with me. And so you start feeling defeated because you feel like God is not hearing you, right? But the reality is, whenever you ask God for anything, the evidence primarily will be spiritual evidence, right? So if I'm asking God for a husband, it's been years. Um, if I'm looking for evidence that God is moving on my behalf, I got to look at the kind of person that He's making me. Because what God will do to prepare you for what He has prepared for you is He will start moving on the inside of you before the outside manifests, right? And so what He will do is He will send a series of situations or circumstances in your life that start actually developing you, right? So I realized that in this season of singleness, man, I've been praying and praying and asking God for a husband, and it just seemed like everything that I've gone through has made me a more patient person. It's made me a more loving person. It's made me a wiser person. It's made me a more committed and faithful person. Do you realize that that's God moving on your behalf, preparing you for what you have been praying for? So don't limit um, yourself to just looking for tangible evidence to believe that God is moving on your behalf. You have to trust the process, because that's the way God prepares us. It's not just about blessing you with evidence and saying, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start sending her on some dates so she can really believe that I'm going to give her a husband. Or I'm going to start making sure that brothers start hollering at her in the church and stuff like that. No, no. You have to consider what God is doing on the inside of you. Because specifically when it comes to marriage, becoming a more patient person, a wiser person, um, a loving person, and a whole bunch of other spiritual attributes that you need in order to steward a marriage that will be pleasing to God. God will start orchestrating those things. And that's why it's so important not only to pray in faith for whatever it is that you're believing in, but it's also important to stay in the will of God. And I think that sometimes we sabotage ourselves for that reason as well, is because we're asking for God something. We're asking God for something, but we're outside of His will. So even if He had it for you, you wouldn't be in the right position to receive it anyway. So we got to make sure that not only am I praying in faith because I truly believe that God can give me what it is that I'm asking for, but I also know that I need to be in position when He chooses to give it to me. And that position is righteous, holy living. A lot of times we're asking God to give us things that were strategically and magnificently designed to bring Him glory, right? We're asking God for these things that He has purposed to bring Him glory, but we're outside of the will of God. So we got to make sure that we're in the will of God. But anyway, again, we have to trust the process. So don't limit yourself, and don't become defeated in believing that God is not moving on your behalf. Don't just look at what's on the outside. Matter of fact, don't even bother with looking what's on the outside of you. Pay attention to what God is doing on the inside of you. Pay attention for how God is transforming your heart, because God is not just giving us blessings. He wants us to be good stewards of those blessings. In order for us to be good stewards of those blessings, we have to be the right people. We have to have the right mindsets. We have to have the right hearts. So again, we have to be willing to trust the process that God has for us, and not just have tunnel vision and think that we can put God in a box and think that I'm asking you for this and this is the way I want you to give it to me. No, we have to be um, um, willing to embrace the processes of God, because it's not just about what God is doing for us, it's about what God is doing in us and through us, right? So trust God's process.